Do you like that? Hey, I just met this woman. They've got an out. The kids vanish. Go run at that brick wall right there. You'll be fine.
Hello, everybody. To our new listeners, welcome. To our old listeners, welcome back. We are the Perspective Potterheads, Ginny B and Terri T, and we're here to discuss our favorite fandoms, starting with and primarily featuring Harry Potter content. So if you like our content, like it, and if you love it, share, subscribe, and support.
Today we are going to be talking about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 6, The Journey, Platform 9 3/4. While we're going to be talking about Chapter 6, we will also touch on things that happen later in the book, things that happen later in the series, any number of the books, the movies, the Fantastic Beasts series, all sorts of stuff will pop up. So spoilers ahead. So if you haven't read it yet, definitely read along.
I think my biggest first question is, what would Harry have done if Mrs. Weasley just happened? I know the Weasleys are always late, but if it wasn't for them, like, he'd just be wandering around the platform. Like, would anybody come to get him? Because that'd be kind of like the situation we're in the next book when they're locked outside the barrier. Like, where is everybody?
So I had that question too. Like, what if he never finds his way onto the barrier or onto the platform? Like, what if he can't get through? And I think that it's interesting. Like, Vernon and Petunia are like, let's just drop him off in London. Bye. And they're laughing. They're like, ha ha ha, you're stuck.
Yeah.
Well, when he comes up and eventually the police are going to come to him and say, what are you doing here? Well, my aunt and uncle left me. I'm trying to go to school, but I missed my train. Like, that's child abuse. He's 11. You just dropped him off at a train station in London and said, peace out.
I think because they didn't want him to have to go to school. Petunia obviously knows how to get on because she was there with Lily.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she doesn't tell him. And I think because they didn't want him to go to school, they think if he can't get in, then he'll have to just go back to them. And that they think that they've beaten the system.
Yeah, but they don't want him at home anymore. Now they know he's a wizard and he knows he's a wizard. Like, Dudley's terrified of him.
But he doesn't really know how to use it.
True.
And they could still try to squash him out of it at this point. But, the wizards always have some sort of undercover wizard in the Muggle world. So it's weird that they don't have somebody there, especially because every year there's new kids coming, like on that very first day. And like, somebody should be there to kind of keep an eye on things, just in case somebody's blowing the cover or whatever, because there are so many wizards in one place in a Muggle world.
So this is another thing that's kind of a what makes me think, huh?
Yeah.
Every year on September 1st, there's all these wizarding children coming to get on the train. They have owls, they have cats, they have rats, they have toads. Some of them, their parents are probably not dressed great.
Yeah.
They're not good at hiding and pretending to be muggles. And you miss like packed with muggles. If you work at King's Cross Station, wouldn't you like get a little suspicious? Or do they have the ministry go around like that evening and just confund everybody?
That's why there should be somebody there that at that time, like that way they can modify memories as it happens. But like if you've been working at platform 9 3/4 for a few years, you notice like every year on September 1st at 11 o'clock, there's a bunch of weirdos hanging about. Like,
and you never see them get on any train. They just come into the station and then they vanish.
Yeah.
You might get a little suspicious.
And so every year it's September 1st. And so the next, like, they have a feast when they get there, and then they start classes the next day. And so if it's Tuesday, the class starts on a Wednesday.
But the classes always start on Monday.
Huh?
The classes always start on Monday. They always have a full week of school that first week.
So if it's a Tuesday, they just get to chill out for.
No, they always start the next day. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a an inconsistency there with timing, because September 1st is not always a Sunday.
Right. And I mean, if it's a Friday, what they're going to start class on, even if they did just decide, well, we'll start class on the next day, you can tell me they're going to class on Saturdays?
Maybe they just redo the week. I don't know. Because September 1st this year was a Wednesday. Was it Wednesday? No. Hang on. Yes, it was a Wednesday, I believe. I was not working, but classes started on September 1st this year. And one of my teachers, who is a big Harry Potter fan, was very excited about classes starting on September 1st. So I was excited too, but I didn't get to be there this year for that. So
when Molly gets there, she's like packed with muggles, and then she says like, well, what's the platform number? And then Ginny's like 9 3/4. How do you not know by this time? You've already had Bill, Charlie, Percy, and Fred and George have been in for a few years now. Like, you've gone there yourself, lady. And like, how do you not know at this point?
I thought about that. That was my first thing. How do you not know? I will pull up to the pharmacy window and they'll say, what is this one's, whichever baby I'm asking for a prescription for, what is their birthday? And I go, mom brain is real. She's got 7 of them. I only got 4. And I feel for her. Like, I always kind of, my mom, there was 5 of us and my mom was always scattered. Like, you'd ask her like, what's the youngest teacher? And she'd be like, and I'm like, Mom, how do you not know that? And I'm like, now that I have 4 kids, I'm like, now I know. How do you not know that? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like, it is hard. It takes a minute to access that information.
But she doesn't really need to know the platform number to get onto the platform, right?
Right. Like, so, she's just kind of like, huh?
I don't know. It's just a weird setup to me to just like try to get Harry that information.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I feel for Mrs. Weasley. I'm sure she's exhausted.
Probably. That's probably the best answer that I've ever heard. It's coming from the wizarding community or the Muggle community about the wizarding community, like on all the forums. And
mom brain's got to be mom brain no matter where you're at. Like, yeah. I don't care if you can do magic or not. It's exhausting to raise children.
Yeah.
Tiny humans. Teething tiny humans.
I think it's really cool though that, like, because we talked about before having to raise them and like teach them, like homeschool them when they're younger. And like when we came to this chapter, I was like, Ginny is excited. Like she wants to go to school. And I'm like, that's the thing, is like when you can't have something, that's when you want it. And it's really cool, the fact that wizards do that, because then it's like, aha, that's how you get them to want to be in school and want to get them to learn, is by saying you can't go to school. Like, because then they want it even more. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty good trick. Like, I don't know.
It's interesting, the whole concept of like homeschooling, and especially in those early years. And maybe that would make them want to go more as they got older. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. But I mean, when you're dealing with magic, and if you're home and if your parents aren't letting you use magic and you get to see it, otherwise you got to wash those pots and pans by hands. Like you can't just magic it away.
I would want, and I like, there's a lot of like criticisms on Hermione, like how much of a crazy nut she is about school. But
I would be Hermione.
I was Hermione when I went to college. Like, so live in a small town. My mom was going to college at the local community college while I was in high school. And she actually graduated with her RN, associates in nursing with an RN, when I was a sophomore in college. It was an incredible accomplishment for her. She was, but no, my stepdad didn't go to college. My dad didn't go to college. My grandparents didn't go to college. My one grandpa has an 8th grade education. Like, he dropped out in 8th grade. College was kind of the forbidden fruit. And it was something that my parents pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. Like, you were going to go to college. You were going to get a degree. That's so important.
Right.
And when I got there, it was amazing. The academic side of it was so challenging for me and was so fascinating that I was Hermione. I went to bed with my textbooks every night and read something before I went to sleep. Maybe didn't memorize the whole course book by heart before I got there, but
yeah,
I very much had a thirst for that knowledge. And if you said today, you can go to Hogwarts, I am there. I'm going to study my butt off. I am going to learn it hardcore because, oh my gosh, what an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, like, I get Hermione at a very deep level.
For sure.
But we haven't quite met Hermione yet. We're still on the platform, which interestingly enough, how he gets there is because they're going to have Dudley's tail removed.
Yes.
We skipped that part. I was like looking back at my notes. I'm like, oh yeah, Dudley's tail.
So are they going to St. Mungo's then?
I don't know.
Because what do you do when you show up at a Muggle hospital and say, remove this tail? Like, that's going to confuse that doctor. And then you have, the whole wizarding world's going to be like,
I don't know. I was wondering about that. Like, what hospital did they go to? Or did they like go to their normal doctor and say he's got this growth on him? Just call it a growth, not a tail, even though it does look like a pig's tail. And the doctor goes, and the wizards swoop in and are like, oh, you need to see the specialist at this hospital.
That's what I think, because they usually have somebody kind of undercover at those areas. So when he gets on the platform, there's like, they talk about cats everywhere of every color, and then they never talk about cats or toads, really.
The only cat you ever hear about is Crookshanks later. Like,
yeah,
there's
it's weird that like even when with Scabbers, like you would think that there'd be at least one other cat, although I've heard that Crookshanks is like half Kniezel, so maybe that has something to do with it. But you would think that somebody else has got to have a half-breed cat.
Somebody else's cat. Cats are smart.
Yeah.
They understand. If I keep looking down, mine managed to squeeze her way into the room with me. She pushed open the door. So then I had to shut the door again, and she's wiggling around in here somewhere. Cats are smart. They're very intuitive. So you would wonder, like, nobody else kind of picked up on, hey, this rat isn't a rat.
Yeah. Do you think it's like based on the houses?
I wondered that too.
Like maybe more, and not to say that they wouldn't, there'd be like Ron has a rat, which he shouldn't. But like Neville has a toad, but that's just because his uncle is not cool. Uncle Algy's not cool.
Well, he's being raised by his grandmother is very old.
Yeah.
And she's friends with Griselda Marchbanks, who tested Dumbledore in Transfiguration.
And I think, and it's his great uncle Algy. So that's probably like grandma's brother or something like that.
Yeah. They're a little out of step.
So probably like the cats and the owls are most likely. And then if I don't know, like, is it that maybe one house might have more cats and another house might be prone towards more owls? And that's just maybe why we don't see as many cats in the Gryffindor tower, because they want to have owls. Maybe they need the owls because Ravenclaw and Gryffindor are in the towers, but Hufflepuff and Slytherin are in the basement. So maybe that's where all the cats are.
I don't know. Millicent Bulstrode has a cat. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Like, oh yeah, there is another cat. There's at least one other cat in Hogwarts because Millicent Bulstrode has one, as I have with my Millicent kitty named for her.
Well, with cats of every color wandering in between all their legs and stuff, you would think that there'd be tons of cats roaming around that and they're probably all locked up in like the common rooms, but it just not as many in the Gryffindor common room.
Or yeah, I don't know. Or maybe the girls are more prone to having cats than the boys, so they're in the girls' dormitory.
Maybe. I don't know.
Food for thought.
So for any of our viewers in here, I just have a question, is that if you could bring an animal to Hogwarts, what would you bring? A cat, a toad, or an owl? Or a rat, because Ron brings a rat. So we'll throw that as an
Or a
option.
pygmy puff, because Ginny gets a pygmy puff.
Oh yeah, a pygmy puff. And then Lee brings a tarantula.
Mhm.
So I mean, do those count as pets, or do they just like fly under the radar? Like,
I
how
don't
does
think
that
they
work?
care. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure
okay.
as long as it didn't make a big mess. Like, I think Harry could have. I always wondered, like, why didn't Harry just bring Sirius as his pet?
Well, I think it's a lot easier to control like a pygmy puff and a tarantula. They're relatively small, and so is a rat. Like
A massive
but
black dog that everybody thinks is the
here's my
Grim.
polar bear. Like Lyra comes in with her polar bear.
Hmm.
You're Nick Verison. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read it.
I love that book. I don't know.
Is it here's
I'd
sorry,
want an
I
owl,
just
but I really, really like cats, so I would probably have a cat.
I would have a cat.
I really like cats.
Here's a weird part about it, because like, and while we're still on animals, because Scabbers was Percy's old rat,
Mhm.
and Percy is very by the book. So when it does not offer a rat as an option, it's weird that he would select to take a rat.
Do you think maybe he left Scabbers at home?
I don't know.
Percy
So
is
he has a pet rat,
very.
but then he just doesn't take it.
I mean, like I think about like college dorms, like because that's the only frame of reference, like as far as going away to school. You could have a fish.
Yeah.
That was it. And so if you had a pet, a dog, a cat, or whatever, they would stay home with your family, or you got an apartment that allowed pets.
Yeah, that actually could make sense, and then that's why Ron just kind of takes care of it after he goes to Hogwarts. Okay, so he obviously got Peter before he was going to Hogwarts,
because he'd been in their family for 12 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So, well, yeah. 12 years as of book 3. I do like that. Hey, I just met this woman. They've got an owl. The kids vanish. Go run at that brick wall right there. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds. Though, hey, some giant just came in and said, "You're a wizard. Come with me." Okay, cool. I was lack of impulse control.
I was a kid once. I did stupid stuff like that too. I think we talked about that in one of the other episodes. I'll buy you a pizza if you guys help me out with this route. Okay.
I did not.
Kids are so trusting.
I've always been risk averse. I'm very much like, no, let's not. I'll stay home. Thank you. That's why I like to read, because I can enjoy the other characters' risks without any to myself. I think that this chapter, and we mentioned this before we started recording, like this chapter is a lot of like character setup. Even you start just mentioning people, like they're on the platform and he glimpses at Neville, he glimpses at Lee. Just you're starting to see people.
Yeah.
And of course we get a good introduction to the Weasley family. And I think this is probably where I was kind of like thinking Harry's loading his trunk. Fred and George help him, which I can say just says a lot. Like if Malfoy had walked by, do you think he would have offered to help Harry? The Weasleys are good people. Yeah. And they're all like, "Oh my gosh, you're Harry Potter." And he's just kind of like, "Huh? Oh, him? Yeah. Oh, that's me."
Yeah.
I like his reaction to. I also like that he watches them out the window, which is a little bit sad for me. Like he really wants that family. Like he's like, "Oh, look, cool." Like he's as interested in them as they are in him. Yeah. I think it says that when he talks about Ron, like he finds Ron just as interesting as Ron finds him, or something like that.
And I mean, he wants to learn, like, and you know, there are different kinds of learning styles and stuff like that, and like that visual thing, like, but also it's a bit of that voyeurism. And we took I took a French through film class, and we watched a bunch of films about voyeurism. because for whatever reason, the French make films like that. And, but like there is intrinsically in us, there is like that piece of wanting to watch things that happen in life. And I think nowadays, because we're always looking at our phones and stuff like that, but we're doing the same thing just through the phone.
Yeah.
That we're watching what happens with other people's lives.
Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, not so much.
Yeah. But part of that is just, that's how we learn about things is, and, you know, as children, and then as we grow and stuff. And it's just, I think voyeurism is a cool concept when it's not overly creepy. Because there's a line there as far as when you're watching people, but at the same time, like that's how we learn about the world.
People watching is fun, like to sit and say, oh, I wonder what their story is, and kind of wonder and think and, you know, make up little stories in your head. It's interesting, especially like if it's like being in a foreign country, so you can't understand what they're saying. So you just kind of have to guess. And it's really, really interesting to just kind of like make up the story of what you think is going on. So this whole little scene that he watches, we get a lot of the Rowling packs a lot of the Weasley family dynamic in a very tiny package.
Yes.
We're going to assume Mr. Weasley's at work. Percy strolls back up in his new robes with his prefect badge. I can just watch him walking like this.
Yes.
He's strutting because that's Percy. And I love how Fred and George are like, oh, Percy, you're a prefect. Did you mention that? Once, twice, all summer. And they even talk about like Molly, like she talks to Percy very fondly. She is very proud of him and his accomplishments. And then she turns to Fred and George. I get one more owl that you've blown up a toilet.
Blown up a toilet? We've never blown up a toilet. Good idea, though. Thanks, Mom.
And that comes back. I mean, we'll see that again at the end of the book. Like they mention this again. It's interesting. You have to pay, and I read this, and I feel like having 4 kiddos and seeing, and also watching my mom parent 5 of us, like someone would say, oh, she's so unfair, like how she's treating Percy versus how she's treating Fred and George. And that's not it. That's not it at all. She loves her children. They all need something a little bit different from her. And Fred and George need the reminder to not blow up a toilet.
Yes. She's very good at individualizing. I did notice, though, because Percy got an owl for being a prefect, but then he also got new school robes. So he got 2 new things when everybody else usually just gets 1 new thing. Because I think it's in book 5 when Ron becomes a prefect. Like she's like, you know, oh, well, when so-and-so, he got this and he got that and Percy got that. But in this chapter, they mentioned Percy getting an owl and new robes at different times, but still.
And you would think that like Bill or Charlie would have had robes that would have been suitable. You never know. Like it's hand-me-downs are weird.
And Charlie and Bill seem to be, they probably were a little bit more reckless with it, because just in the little bit that I've played with the Hogwarts mystery, they do have like a bit more of that, a little bit more Fred and George in them. So they're like, they seem pretty balanced. And when we get to know them a little bit more in the later books, you know, like one of them is a curse breaker for Gringotts. That's relatively dangerous. And Charlie works with dragons. And so it's not sit behind the desk type of
they're not
profession.
Going into which is interesting because Mrs. Weasley really pushes like a ministry career. Like she wants them to have a career in the ministry, and Bill and Charlie don't.
She's probably worried for them because their jobs are relatively dangerous. So she probably wants a little bit more like, I want to make sure I don't want all to have to worry about all my kids.
I like that Ginny automatically, like they set that up right there. Ginny's like, oh, Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I love him already. I have not met him more than just that kid that just asked my mom for directions, but I love him. I will like, that sounds a little bit weird, but I will also preface it, like, I feel like that the Harry Ginny relationship is something I cheered for the whole time. Like, I want Ginny, like, even before it becomes a thing, like, I'm like, come on, Ginny, you can convince him.
So I have a theory, because Ginny is fangirling out right now. You know what I mean? And it's like, I had a huge crush on JTT in the 90s. Like, he was the guy we all crushed over. And then it was Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
And yeah, if they started
mind.
coming to my school, yeah, I would be the same way. Mm-hmm. Like, because he's a celebrity, he's famous. And Ginny's not the only girl who fawns over him because of that.
Yes.
Because she doesn't know him personally. He could be as bad as Draco, for all she knows. So she's just basing this off of, he's famous, I want to meet him, and
she's 10.
Yeah.
She's 10.
Yeah, I was totally her. So I get it. But at the same time, like, when it develops, she still kind of has that for him, and it doesn't take her until, like, what, book 4-ish till she actually starts talking to him. And I have a theory.
Little bit in book 3, but book 4.
Yeah, I have a theory, and I'm gonna, like, as we go through the chapters, I'm gonna start actually noting some of the things, because I think there's more ingrained that might back this up. I think that Ginny uses a love potion on Harry, not like a big immortantula thing. I think it's a very weak potion to tweak the circumstances. So just to kind of say, like, just the nudge in the right direction to make him notice her more. And I think that Molly might have done the same. Molly might have planted the same idea in her head, because I think it's in the 5th book.
It's
Molly, Hermione,
it's in
Ginny.
The 3rd book.
Is it the 3rd one?
It's the 3rd book, because they're staying at the Leaky Cauldron.
Okay. And they're laughing and they're joking about how Molly mixed a love potion when she was at Hogwarts. And
I hadn't thought about that.
And then when we get, and Harry doesn't really start taking notice of Ginny that way until the 6th book, when Fred and George have their shop and they're all looking at love potions.
But we see how those love potions work, and it's like crazy love.
Well, if you're talking about, like, the ones that Romilda Vane got, because those were out of date, because she gave them to him before, but he threw them away, or threw them into his thing, and so they had time to set. But
why
also,
did he keep those? Why, Harry? Why?
But also they were talking about, like, they come in different strengths, and they're based on the attractiveness of the girl, and, like, a whole bunch of different. Pretty. Yeah. So I don't think that Ginny would need to do too much to just kind of say, yeah, like, just a drop here or there, and just something to kind of get him to notice. And then, because he likes her, but I don't think he necessarily thinks of her in that way until it's like, maybe I do, because of all of these reasons. And you know what? Yeah, why not?
See, I think it's more other people have started noticing Ginny in that way. And Harry immediately thinks, I'm having that big, like, I'm the big brother. That's why I feel this way. And then he's like, no, because I'd really like that to be me.
But see, that's the thing, is she starts dating people 2 years before that.
But it's not like,
so it doesn't, it takes a full 2 years and around the same time as the love potion is introduced. And that's why I think once he gets those feelings, at first he's like, wait a second. No, that can't be it. Yeah, that's actually it. Like, so I think he just needed that nudge.
I'm gonna
collect evidence.
Because I'm gonna collect. You collect your evidence. I disagree.
I'm gonna collect my evidence, and by the time that it's all, like, we get through all of the books, I'm gonna have it all laid out. Every section of it, I'm gonna have quotes, and it's gonna be organized.
I will say, like, I think that she started dating the end of 4th year, and 5th year Harry couldn't do much of anything. 5th year Harry just didn't, like, he was too angry at the world.
Yeah. But that would have been a good point for him to start getting releasing some of that anger by doing something he loved. That sounded weird, but you know what I mean.
Now something, a distraction, but I think he was just too
Yeah.
deep into it.
Yeah.
We'll get there with book 5. Not my
Mhm.
favorite, but very important for character development.
Yeah.
So I also like that they set up the character of Mrs. Weasley. Like her immediate instinct and reaction to, oh, he was all alone. Like you can hear the concern and the pity in her voice. And I hate to use the word pity, but it's the only one I could really come up with. That's what's in my notes. Oh, no wonder he was alone. And she feels bad. She wants to mother him because that's just her role. Like she just is going to mother everybody that comes into contact with her. The twins. I wonder if he remembers what you know who looks like. Don't you dare ask him that.
So with Fred and George, and I don't know if I've mentioned this out loud yet, but Fred is more of the leader and George is kind of more of the follower. Mm-hmm. And Fred is the more, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but George seems to be a little bit more tender. Like George is the one who offers to help load the trunks. And Fred is the one who's all at least verbalizing, hey, we should ask him if he remembers anything about his trauma. Like, so, because I mean, we all kind of wonder that, but nobody's going to vocalize that except Fred, who's a little bit more, again, I can't think of the right word for, but it's not aggressive, but
he's impulsive. He there isn't that, he doesn't have the pause. Yeah. He thinks it and it's like, or he thinks it and he just does it without like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this. They both lack that impulse. But again, we said I feel that's a little bit of a Gryffindor trait.
Like, I mean, because they are really similar in so many ways, but I think just slightly Fred is a bit more over and George is a little bit more gentler.
I'll go with that.
And I don't know how it is in your audiobooks, but even in mine, like there's a little bit of a voice difference between the two, and George has the softer voice.
I don't know how Jim, but I'll have to I'm listening to book 5 right now, so I'll have to. So Ron sits down with Harry because there's nowhere else. The twins introduce him like, hey, I'm Fred, I'm George. This is our brother, Ron. Lee's got a tarantula, gotta go. But I really, and I love that, like Mrs. Weasley had said, keep an eye on Ron. And they're like, yeah, he's good. Bye.
Yep.
I don't got to watch out for you. I like how Ron kind of asks some questions and Harry volunteers the information. Like I remember a lot of green light. But this is where Harry makes the comment that he finds Ron fascinating too. He's like, ooh, you've got wizarding brothers. And Ron's all like, yeah.
Yeah.
If I do good, it's not that big of a deal. And I've never asked my younger siblings this because I'm the first of the 5. So I did it first. But we're all very different. Like we all have different strengths and different interests. So I don't know that it's necessarily a competitive thing, but I've not asked them if they felt that way. Like they had to live up to and compete.
Well, I'm an only child, but I have a stepbrother and stepsister, and they're older. And especially to my stepsister, because she's closer to my age. Not that we're all he's only 2 years older than him or older than her, but for me, that's a 7-year difference. Mm-hmm. So I'm still closer to her than to him, but it was like, oh, well, she achieved all of this stuff, so you better do all of that stuff. And I feel like I'm kind of in between the two, but I could just, there was such a high bar set that it was really hard to.
I wonder that. I wonder my, academics is my thing. I did very well in college. I really enjoyed the academics of it. My sister so Bill was the prefect and got really good grades and this, that, and the other. And Charlie was the captain of the Quidditch team, which I think my next youngest sister, she played basketball. She ran cross country. She did a little track. She played sports in college. Like sports were kind of her thing. And the middle sister, she wasn't going to do sports, and she chose to do something different. The next one, she's one that I think does a little more of like kind of my thing. She did Model UN. She played a little bit of sports. She just kind of, and then you have the baby who is very much her own person and has her own successes. And it's interesting. I wonder what role that plays. And it's something I think I might ask them now, and I'll have to give a follow-up on that. I like how Ron's embarrassed that they couldn't afford something. They couldn't afford an owl for him. He got Scabbers. And I like how Harry's like, oh, that's nothing. I've never had any money ever in my life. Right. And then the trolley comes and he's like, well, I'm going to buy everything. And he does. He buys one of everything.
I can't imagine. So I don't know how much. I think I looked this up and I don't remember the numbers now. I should have written it down because I did Google it about how much it translates to in like US dollars. And I think I can't remember if it's a knut or a sickle that is equivalent to like 53 cents. So
knut. That sounds about right.
I think it's a knut is about 53 cents American. So how much candy can you get with 11 sickles and 7 knuts? Like, I really need to do like one of those
But if you went up to a concession stand and you bought one of everything,
oh yeah,
you're dropping a lot of money. And I mean, there are things on there that like the cauldron cakes, the pumpkin pasties, like they're heavier things. It's not like, just a little thing of candy. They're like cakes and things like that.
And he's buying like tons of chocolate frogs because they open a bunch of them and then there's still some sitting there.
Mm-hmm. I like how Harry just very much knows exactly what to say. Like, here, I'll trade you for a sandwich. And Ron's like, you don't want this. They're dry. I don't like corned beef. And Harry's like, come on. And they just like don't even eat the sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives an insight into the kindness. This is one of the examples where Harry is very kind. He's not always perfectly kind, but he has a kind heart. And I think it's interesting. The sentence said something like, it was a nice feeling.
I think there's also that part of him that, he's always been alone.
Mm-hmm.
He's never had anybody to trade things with.
Yeah.
And if we go back to like, he was watching him and that voyeurism part, like if he was alone in school, he probably had to watch everybody else and what they were doing. And he saw that and he's like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So he's like
a friend.
So he wants that. Yeah.
And he's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like this kid is actually sitting here and sharing with me and talking to me, and nobody's going to, like, he's not going to get beat up for it tomorrow by Dudley.
And they do the birdie bots. Have you ever had a box?
Again, I'm very risk averse. I have tried them. I do I nibble the very, very end. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, do not. I will also say I'm not a big jelly bean fan. I eat jelly beans purely out of nostalgia because they were my grandfather's favorite candy, my papa's. So I eat jelly beans and think of him, even though I don't really like jelly beans.
I never used to like jelly beans, but when I was in my early 20s, and I was definitely more risky in those days than I am now, because now I want to nibble this first. But when I was in my 20s and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get these Birdie Bots beans at like the midnight thing released for the book. And so then I'm eating them and throw one in my mouth, and I think sardine was the worst flavor, or curry might be like the worst flavors I've ever eaten. And the best odd one, not like a cinnamon, but is grass. I like
the grass one wasn't bad.
Yeah. But like the chocolate one, I didn't like. I like chocolate, but I don't like the chocolate jelly bean.
I don't like chocolate jelly beans. I like the toasted marshmallow. if we're going with real, like just the Jelly Belly flavors, I like toasted marshmallow.
How do they get these flavors? Like
Magic.
Magic. They have to, because in the Muggle world, first to get something to taste exactly like that, oh my gosh, it has to be magic.
Yeah, because I don't think, like, a lot of times I don't think things taste like what they say they taste like. I don't know. Magic. And in the Muggle world, it's lots of chemicals.
Yes. And so then they get all those chocolate frogs and they name drop a bunch of people, but Dumbledore is the only one we actually get to know a little bit. That's the one that they actually read. And this is where like some of my questions come up, because for one, it doesn't have his full name. So I'm a little disappointed in that.
It doesn't. Do you want me for interest, do you want me to read the clip of the card?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts. Considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling. They should have put on there he enjoys knitting.
I was thinking about the knitting too.
Knitting.
I was also thinking, isn't he like supreme wug monk or like
mugwump of the Wizengamot and Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot and supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. Where's the letter?
Like he's got a couple titles under him. Then they're just not listed here. But the defeat of Grindelwald, we get a whole series about that later. And the 12 uses of dragon's blood, which I think in the Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore, which take with a grain of salt, but still.
They say he stole those. He's like somebody had.
There was like already 10 before he finished the rest of them. But I still want to know, what are the 12 uses of dragon's blood?
Ooh. Like,
what do you use dragon's blood for?
Obviously for painting your walls with when you want to pretend you've been attacked.
Right.
There's number one. Fake blood.
Yes. Use dragon's blood as fake human blood. And then what does he do with Nicholas Flamel?
Creates the Sorcerer's Stone.
No, because Nicholas Flamel in this year is already 665. So we had to have had it before, because Dumbledore's only 100 and something. So
alchemy is the creation of something, like from nothing. Like, it's, at least that's my understanding of alchemy, is like it's creating. So I don't know, what are they creating together?
Yeah. They're just like randomly playing around with things, trying to make new things, and then
better Sorcerer's Stone.
I hope we learn more about this in the Fantastic Beasts series.
Oh yeah, I hope so.
Because I want to know, what else is there besides the stone? So my mom always points out about Nicholas Flamel being 666 when he dies. Like, if that's some sort of secret message. I don't know.
I like how Harry's like shocked. He's gone. Where'd he go? And right. Ron's like, what do you mean? And Ron's just as much in awe, like, what do you mean? They stay put?
Whoa, weird.
So they get to meet Neville again. He comes in and asks for his toad. And then there's Hermione.
Yes.
Her big teeth and bushy brown hair and her bossy voice. Like, she has a bossy sort of voice. And I love Hermione. I identify with Hermione very, very much. So she's my character.
She gets so excited when she sees Ron's wand out.
You're going to do magic?
Let's see. And I know, so the thing with the spell is that you would think that Ron would know it's fake. Well, okay, so here's the thing. It's either one of two things. One, is it fake? Is it just not working because that rat is really Peter Pettigrew? So he's not a rat, he's an animagus. Or 2, every other spell is like one or 2
word.
Latin word based, and this is like a poem. Like that's like, it's like an actual witch's
And
spell.
he got it from Fred and George.
Yeah.
So you have to know, like, I don't think it's gonna work.
I think Hermione might be some sort of servant, because as much as you want to read these books, she has everything memorized. Like, and throughout the series, it's not only books, but like she hangs on to and remembers like almost verbatim what anybody and everybody has said. That's just unusual for even the best of us who want to know what's going on, but to actually be able to recall it on like that.
It's interesting. Like I can almost hear when she's talking about all of this. And like she's like, I know all about you. And like you could just hear this really rapid fire, like as fast as she possibly can, like spilling out all of this stuff that she knows. I feel like, and I think we talked about this, like her parents are dentists, so they're arguably pretty busy people. And I think she has to achieve to be noticed. And I also think like she may not have really had friends outside of the wizarding world. Part of that is that bossy know-it-all-y type personality. Mm-hmm. But she's clearly different. Like you said, just her memory ability would set her apart. And I'm sure she's like freakishly using magic all the time.
I think that there's, I mean, aside from that, because even, if she's been using magic without knowing that it's magic, mm-hmm. then yeah. But I think also aren't people who are neurodivergent, they just have a harder time making friends in general, don't they?
Typically.
So
it just depends.
Yeah.
And you can see like she struggles. And I can see this like in even just if you're, let's say, a slightly above average, like my second, he's incredibly smart. And he struggles a little more with some of the emotional regulation stuff. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, like in preschool, he would be academically, he could do this, and this, he knew all his letters, he knew all his numbers, he knew all his, sounds. And he was difficult. He had a very hard time. Like if he wanted something, he couldn't put that pause in there. There was very little impulse control. He's, 7 now. He's still struggles with it some days. His emotion, like social emotionally, he struggles a little more than he does academically. And you can see this with her, like, and he does not have the struggle with making friends. He's got a lot of friends, but he does have some social struggles. Not everybody's going to be strong in everything. And I think Hermione's very, very intelligent, but I think her social struggles aren't in the behavior sector because she's not going to do anything that is going to break the rules.
Right.
It's in that interactions with peers.
Ron, like when Ron starts listing all of the new things that or all the hand-me-downs he gets,
mm-hmm.
And this is kind of when he pulls out his wand, we see his wand. It's mm-hmm. like the unicorn tip is coming off, and like, because it didn't occur to me earlier when he said I got, because he's listing it off and Charlie's old wand, but why does Charlie get a new wand?
Probably because Charlie has left Hogwarts and is making his own money and can afford it. Wands are very expensive.
Well, but I mean, I guess also like, because this wand is kind of beaten up, like it's the unicorn hair is poking out of it. But so
and I think they probably acquired it secondhand, or it was a family member's. Like Neville uses his dad's wand.
Yeah, but you would think that wizards would at least know a little bit about the way wands work, and that they work better when they're your own and they choose you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we know about that later, but we're also novices to the wizarding world. We understand it as it comes to us. But if you've lived in the wizarding world your whole life, like Molly's whole family is wizards, except for her one second cousin that's an accountant. Like,
I love that Rowling decides that they're like a very, very muggle thing. Like, you are an accountant.
And is he actually a wizard who is an accountant, or is he like a squib who becomes an accountant?
I don't know. But we see this a couple, like Ron is not the only one that doesn't have his own wand. And I can like, wands are expensive.
Yeah.
And they don't have the money. So they make do. I wonder if that wand had actually been one of Molly's brothers. That was my initial, like, Charlie got
Before
it hand me down. When Charlie went out into the world to start work, he got his own wand.
Mm-hmm. That could be.
Neville uses his dad's wand up until it gets broken at the Ministry in book 5.
But that's when he starts also really accelerating too.
Yes.
Because I mean, he does, you know, like his will like gets him through the DA meetings a little bit better, but then he actually really starts getting good at magic once he gets his own wand.
I do like that they initially, like, that there's that very much a like butt heads with the Ron and Hermione situation. And you know, like from that sentence, like, and they're talking about houses, and she's like, I expect we'll be there soon, and she just flits off like, I'm so excited, I'm just gonna go over here and do my thing. And Ron's like, whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it.
Right.
Like, from that sentence, you know, those two are meant to be.
Yeah. And so there's also that thing where people say that they're not meant to be together, like that Hermione is better with Harry, and I disagree. I love the Hermione Ron dynamic, and it's little things like this that it's like they don't like each other at first, and then the way that they grow together is really cute. And we know he's going to be in Gryffindor. Well, he says he expects to be in Gryffindor because his whole family was, and doesn't know what they're going to say if he's not. And then Hermione is like, I think I want to be in Gryffindor, although Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. And it's like, I am surprised that Hermione would not choose Ravenclaw over Gryffindor.
That surprises me a little bit too. But she's, and I know that she's brave. Yeah. And I think she does have a little bit. It's not in the showy, flashy, like take risks like the boys, but think about, like, she just left her family and everything she knew to just embark on this adventure of, I'm going to go learn magic. And she is, Hermione is brave. And I think the Sorting Hat picks up on that. I like how Ron again reinforces that Slytherin is bad. What if they put me in Slytherin?
And I think it's interesting that the first two pureblood wizards he meets are Draco and Ron, and just their ideals in general about the wizarding world and what makes a good wizarding family. And Draco's like, you have to be a pureblood. And Ron's all like, oh my gosh, imagine being in Slytherin.
Right. It's interesting. I think that Harry does say, oh, Ron must be one of those old wizarding families. Like he thinks that, like, oh, this is what that boy was talking about.
Right. Like as if they're going to be on the same page, but Ron's family are a bunch of blood traders. So they're different, like the McCoys and the Hatfields type of thing.
Yeah. And there's clearly a strong dislike, which we'll get to that in a minute. That's the next page. I do love that he's like, so Harry is like, what do your older brothers do? Like, what do wizards do when they get out of Hogwarts? And, you know, Charlie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa, something for Gringotts. Oh, by the way, did you hear about Gringotts?
Right.
Then he's like, oh, but I don't suppose you get get that with the Muggles. Like you can't get the Daily Prophet. You live with Muggles. Never mind. Okay, let me fill you in. Someone tried to rob it. And I like how he's like, what happened? And Ron's like, well, nothing. That's why it's not big news. Like nothing happened.
And then everybody thinks that this has to do with you know who when this happens. And Harry's like, well, Voldemort. And he says that he's more, I guess the book says he felt more comfortable calling him Voldemort. But that's like the only time that he's ever said the name. Every other time it's you know who.
Yeah.
So it's weird that he feels comfortable saying it or just has, but I can understand him wanting to need to say it. Like, that's the guy who killed my parents and I want to remember that name. And I'm going to it's almost like he knows he has that that he's got to follow that path. Like, he's got to track him down and he's got to know that that guy's dead and taken care of.
So I like how they kind of they transition very quickly. And it's interesting. Like, I feel like this is the most realistic, way to follow conversation is they're talking about Voldemort. And then they're like, hey, what's your Quidditch team? And it seems a little jumpy, but if you've ever followed a conversation, think about our conversations on the phone, we jump from this to this to this. And we're like, how did we get here? What were we talking about originally? So I think it's very cute, especially for 11-year-old boys. Like, oh yeah, by the way.
Yeah.
Voldemort, robbing banks, Quidditch.
I think Ron's uncomfortable talking about you know who. So that might be part of hey, let's get off the subject. Let's talk about Quidditch, because and this is the second time that we learn about the 4 balls and the 7 players. And this really bores me. And not just because she throws a few sentences again in here, but because I know it's coming up again later in the book several times. And then again in the next book. And she gets really detailed, the more and more we go. And it's okay, I already know this part. I've read it twice already. I'm sick of hearing about Quidditch. And I'm just not into sports in the Muggle world, let alone don't be drilling it into me now in the Wizarding world.
It's interesting because I like how if you read as you read the book successively, I feel like there's a lot of repetition and introduction and description of characters and stuff. But I get it in a way that if somebody were to pick up book 3, at least they'd have some frame of reference. I would hope that they would go, oh, this is the 3rd book in the series. I need to read 1 and 2 because that's how I work at things. But
right. I think once you get to book 4, that's when you have to that's probably the cutoff of you can't read you can't just pick up book 4. Yeah. Book 3, yeah, you probably could. Book 2, you probably could. But once you get to book 4, 5, 6, 7, you need to know what happened in the books prior. So then Malfoy and Crabbe and Goyle walk in, and they're starting their drama because they always do. And Scabbers bites Goyle.
Yes.
But it's Peter who bites Goyle. And it's just really interesting always to think about the things that, because he's a human.
Yes.
And so then I got to think about what his motivation is for biting Goyle.
I think that I was trying to come up with that too. I was like, what is his actual, does he not like, but Malfoy, Malfoy doesn't seem like he has lots of real friends, Lucius, sorry, Professor. I think he is a little more along the lines, he has the same thing with Draco. I don't think Crabbe and Goyle are his friends. They're his minions. He doesn't have friends. He has minions. You do as I tell you to do. Stand here on either side of me. Be my bodyguards, basically. And I think, Peter obviously knows who they are.
Mm-hmm. And so then I want a couple things, because I thought that, and then I thought, well, maybe he feels bad that he betrayed Harry, on some deeper level, because he was friends with his dad back in school. And this is just the very minimal thing that he could do to kind of be I'm on your side, but also to stay within the Wizarding family that he has.
I I think there's some self-preservation there too. Those are his snacks. He's eating those snacks too. Don't take my snacks.
That's the other note I have down on here too, is that when he transforms into a human, he's going to eat the rest of those chocolate frogs when they're off to the Great Hall. Because I mean, you got to imagine, like, and that's the thing is, like, he has to, at some point, unless Ron is just feeding him really good table scraps, like, I can't imagine that he would stay a rat for like 24/7 for 12 years. Like, he's got to stretch his legs out a little bit, you would think.
I don't know how comfortable that transformation is.
But
I mean, Theory stays as a dog for quite some time.
But if you don't use magic, then you kind of like it bottles up in you and you have like that obscurus thing. But if you're an animagus, then does that count as doing magic?
Yeah,
like,
where does Peter have his wand? Magical transformation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
that isn't interesting. I just envision that he always stays as a rat because he can just sleep and be lazy. I don't know. I'm not a Pettigrew fan.
Me neither.
I think that it's interesting that, like, while Draco is sneering about Ron being a Weasley, Ron snickers when he introduces us, like, oh, that's who you are. I know who you are.
Yeah.
And
I like in the next book, like, we see how their parents don't like each other, and that's kind of their prejudices against each other already, which we see their prejudices here, but we get like that backstory in the next book.
I really like just the scene where Draco is saying, you'll find out that some wizarding families are better than others. Let me help you. And Harry's like, no. Thanks, I can figure that out for myself. And Malfoy, like, he goes from I want to be friends with this kid to nasty in like a millisecond. Like, you better watch out. You're gonna go the same way as your parents if you hang around with riffraff. And I'm like, ooh, that went dark real fast.
Yeah. Right. It's like, that's not gonna get him to change his mind. Like, the opposite.
I know there's a lot of like, and I can see it like in the next book when he's hiding and he hears, and Draco's like, hey, Harry Potter this and Harry Potter that, Harry Potter this. And Lucius is like, you've said this already. I've heard this.
Yeah.
Draco's upset. I think he did want to be Harry's friend. And he's just like, wait, he doesn't want to be my friend. I don't know what to do with that.
It's like one of the first things that he probably hasn't even been able to get. Like, Draco gets what he wants, just like Dudley did. And he wanted to be able to boast that he was friends with
Harry Potter,
the boy who lived. Yeah, this very famous kid. And he doesn't get to be.
No, you get to be mortal enemies.
Yeah.
And I like how Malfoy leaves and Hermione pops back up. Like, what are you doing? You're causing trouble in here. Are you fighting? Like, you shouldn't be fighting. You're gonna get in trouble. And the only reason she came back is because people were being childish in the corridors.
Yeah. And then it's pretty much time for their luggage to get sent up, which it just magically is taken care of for them. So do house elves take up their luggage?
I don't know. And this is the only time they announce it on the train.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're back to Hagrid, who gets the job of chaperoning these first years across the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I love you get your first glimpse of Hogwarts.
Yes.
Oh.
And we never get to see like where like they dock their boats, and we just never hear of that part of the castle again.
The castle's huge though.
Yeah.
There's many other fun places to go. You know, Chamber of Secrets, Room of Requirement, to name a few. I like how Hagrid finds Neville's toad.
Yeah, he's just randomly hanging out in a boat. How did he get there? He was on the train and then he's in the boat. And okay, so the train left at 11 from London. And when they're arriving, it's dark. So we're thinking, and it's September 1st, so summer. it's probably at least got to be
8-ish?
after 8, yeah, somewhere around 8ish. So we're looking at a 9-hour train ride, and I've never rode on a train to know necessarily like how long it takes them to get places, but
Just
I mean,
depends
England
on.
is relatively small, right? Like,
Well, technically, I believe Hogwarts is in Scotland.
okay, but still,
Way
like
up north.
is it still a 9-hour drive though? Like,
And
that
it's
still
going to
sounds
depend on how
long.
fast the train is going. And I mean, I've taken some train rides. I know we had about a 30-minute train ride every day to commute into the city of Rome, but the train was really, really slow. Whereas like we took the high-speed train to get down to, I think it was Naples. Yeah, we flew to Venice. We took the train to Florence and Naples. And I think Naples, we took the high-speed train because otherwise we would have been on the train all day. And we didn't want to be on the train all day. We wanted to go see Naples and Pompeii. So
like they pass all these houses and all, like, for a good 9-hour stretch of the train ride, and nobody sees them.
it might be. And if you see them, it's just you see a train. Which trains, like for us, like we are not used to passenger trains. But they're much like, I don't know about England, but I know like in Italy, like everybody rides the train. You ride the train. That's what you do. I rode the train every day when I lived there.
So they just don't even look. They're just like, oh, it's another train.
Yeah. I think it's just kind of one of those things that blends into the, like passenger trains are not like not a rarity. Like us, we see cargo trains with their spray painted carriages and stuff all going by. But I mean, if we saw a passenger train, we'd be like, ooh, what's that? I feel like this chapter there's a lot of important like character development, but there's not a lot of like stuff. It's very much a bridge between chapters, but it ends on a cliffhanger. So they walk up the lawn, they're at the front doors. Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. How do you not keep reading? Like, how do you not go, oh my gosh, I need to know what happens next?
Right.
Or maybe that's just me because I have a book problem.
I think like, and those are all of the notes I had from this chapter, and I'm like, and I wanted to keep reading. So, but I just can't take all those notes all at once.
I know.
Because then I'll forget about what I read.
Put it down. And I also like that the just in the books, like the illustrations at the beginning, like the journey from platform 9 3/4, like this is something I don't think we've talked about yet, is the chocolate frog. And you don't know what that is yet. And Dumbledore. Right. The next chapter is about the Sorting Hat.
And it's Peeves.
My very dear friend, Peeves the Poltergeist, is the picture. So, and those of you who are only book goers, or only movie goers, you might not know Peeves.
Nope. So my mom and I decided, when we watch the movie, it's going to be really hard for me to remember what has happened in the beginning of the movie or of the book when I watch the movie to know what the differences are. So I thought, well, let's put the DVD in and we'll start watching the DVD, and then I could pause it and take a note and check, double check the book, and just kind of as I go. And I'm like, well, but I'm only 6 chapters in right now. So, I've got to go back to the first chapter and kind of start. Anyway,
we have to watch the movie together. That's the only way it's going to work. We're going to have to watch it together with our books there. It's going to be an all-day thing, and we're going to have some Knickerbocker glories.
Yes.
We need to find a recipe.
Well, so one of the things I thought would be easy to do would be go to the chapter guide, and because the first chapter in in the DVD selection thing, when you go to the chapter section, and it says and like,
see, I don't have it. I have it digitally.
I don't remember what the first chapter was, and I don't have my notes on me right now. I think they're in another notebook, but they start off relatively the same, and then they start splitting apart when you get to Diagon Alley. And because they break it off into Gringotts and Ollivanders and the sorting, and then there's only 18 chapters in the book. There's like 35 chapters from the movie scene selection if you go into like the scene selection thing from the menu.
I am very excited to talk about the next chapter, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorting is fascinating.
Oh yeah, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about in that one. So with the audiobooks for this chapter, there are just a couple things that I keep noticing as far as the were, the was, the toward, the towards, the leaned, the versus leaned. And it reminded me of things like when my ex-husband took a class on communication in college, and they were talking about the difference between proper grammar versus just the basic understanding what the person is trying to say. And so, and we see that a lot in like the differences in here, because is it really important, like the subject verb agreement of was versus were? We all know that that's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like if I were to take an English test and I wrote down that, I don't even remember what the context was, or if I left out an article, like in one of these things, it says next day versus the American version is the next day. And it's like, if I was taking an English test, I would get marked against that because it's not grammatically correct. But you know what I'm trying to convey. If I say leaned versus lent, like,
I like in books when they're not as grammatically correct. And it's interesting, like for me, I like parsing sentences, so I'm weird. But everyone's like, this is horrible. I love it. It's fun.
It's the way that we talk, though.
Yeah. And it's for me, when I'm reading something, I enjoy the context and it makes it more real. If it's all like very prim and proper, it's harder to get the context and meaning out of it.
Right. And again, it comes down to, do you understand what they're trying to say? Like, you understand this is as communication, not necessarily that it's correct. And as long as you understand the context, it doesn't matter if it's proper.
I have a question. In the British version, because in the book, it's anything off the cart gears. Is it anything off the trolley?
It is trolley.
When I read that, and I don't know, maybe it's because that's the way it is in the movies, or if that's just become kind of a phrase. And I don't know if they use the word trolley later in different books.
So they use trolley in this book as far as when Harry's pushing his cart to get into platform 9 3/4. It's a trolley. And everybody has their several times they have their trolleys with their trunks and their owls and
they use the word cart.
Yeah, and anything that was cart in the book is trolley in the audiobook. So, so aside from those, the grammatical was, were, towards things, and I'll probably just stop mentioning them. We'll get down to like the actual like nouns, like trolley and cart.
Yeah.
Differences. When Aunt Petunia comes into vacuum, she hoovers. So she no longer comes into hoover anymore. We talked about trolley. The inspector stand at the ticket station is just his box. The divide versus dividing platforms. Rucksack versus backpack.
Which they use later in later books. Like some of these words don't get changed. Yeah.
There's one part where they just like leave out words like I don't even remember the rest of the sentence. I just put call yourself and they get, or you call yourself. What page is that on? 92. So I don't even know what they're talking about. When Fred and George call yourself our mother. So, and then he leaves out the word you in that. Ticket box versus barrier. And then random changes to each other versus to one another. Going red versus turning red. Fringe versus bangs, sweets, candies. Oh my gosh, I can't read my writing. I need to write better. Oh my gosh. In there versus inside. When they're talking about all the stuff he buys off of the cart. or trolley. Pasties and cakes versus pasties, cakes, and candies. They leave out and candies in the audiobook.
Interesting.
Set books versus course books. Trainers versus sneakers. And I gotta look up this other one because I don't remember the context of this one. But on one point he said, oh, whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it. And then, but in the audiobooks, whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not one. So yeah, those are all of the differences between the audiobooks and the books.
I should bring in my other books because I just have book 3 sitting here because again, I referenced that one thing and I wanted to look it up. But they call them trolleys for their luggage, but they still the witch with the food cart in book 3. But I do know, like by book 6, he's holding his telescope and his trainer. In book 7, they refer to his backpack as a rucksack. Like, so I think as the books progress, they Americanize them less and less.
That's good.
I feel like
then I'll have less and less notes for these things.
And that might be wrong. Like there might still be like your grammatical stuff and things like that. But I think the actual like verbiage and stuff for like terms isn't as different. So I think that wraps it up.
I think so. So everybody, that's our perspective. Let us know your perspective in the comments below. Before we go, we'd like to thank our editor, Alan, our families, and our listeners. So remember to like, share, subscribe, and support. And until next time, stay safe, keep faith. Good night.